Disclosure and Representations Bill Lords.
Before we begin consideration of the bill, we must first deal with the citizens' motion, which stands on the paper in the name of the Minister. I call the Minister to move the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr Amess. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship this afternoon. The citizens' motion is tabled today to ensure that we have sufficient parliamentary time to discuss this measure. I have to say that the bill implements a series of widely supported and not long necessary changes to the law. Those recommendations have been made by the Law Commission. Just in case the committee doesn't fully consider the bill today, we are enabled through the citizens' motion to sit every Wednesday at 2 o'clock whilst the House is sitting. So perhaps that's an incentive for us all. Yes, of course.
Mr. Christopher Leslie.
The Minister giving way. Does that include the provision to sit beyond this session of Parliament? Could we carry over the bill, for example? It doesn't seem to exclude that proposition. But the most important question I have for the Minister is, has he an idea about report stage, and can he confirm that that will actually be on the floor of the House?
Minister.
Mr Amess, there is no carryover motion attached to this bill, and clearly if it was to be carried over to the next session, there would have to be a motion on the floor of the House to enable that to happen. The honourable member asked a question about the report stage. He will be aware, because we participated in the second reading debate, which was in a committee room rather than the floor of the House. There is a special procedure that relates to Law Commission bills. I'm sure I'm not going to commit to the fact that there will be a report stage on the floor of the House of Commons, because actually I'm not entirely sure I know what the procedure is myself, Mr Amess, and I would advise on a member to seek counsel, if not comfort, from the clerks on this matter.
Mr. Christopher Leslie.
Well, a sort of speech, Mr Amess, and it's a pleasure to serve in your chairmanship, but I suppose it's also a sort of point of order addressed to you, whether you as the chair are able to tell us. I'm pretty sure that even though we had this rather bizarre, odd arrangement of sending this bill to second reading to a committee, which in my view is a practice that really should be avoided, especially when there's no other business going on in the House, the government having mismanaged their programme so abysmally. But surely you can confirm that report and third reading will be on the floor of the House. I don't really have any other problems with this particular motion, but I'm quite anxious to find out if we can have some clarification.
Well, further to that point of order, perhaps I might be able to add some clarification, having received a degree of illumination during the duration of the honourable member's speech. There will be a report stage on the floor of the House. But hopefully not on Tuesday.
The question is the citizens' motion. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The question is that clause 1 stand part of the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye. Aye. Well,
Mr. Christopher Leslie.
Mr Amess, if we're actually getting to clause 1 of the bill, I think it would be useful to hear the Minister at least explain where the bill generates from, particularly for those members of the committee who might not have been party to the rather Byzantine second reading committee arrangement that we've had. I don't wish him to repeat at length the rationale for the bill, but clause 1, as I understand it, does include some important definitions about consumers of insurance products, and most of our constituents will be consumers of insurance products, whether it's motor insurance or flood risk insurance, household insurance, contents insurance and so forth. And therefore, I think clause 1 is as good a place as anywhere just to get a sense of the strategic overview of the bill. I welcome the bill. I think it's an important piece of legislation. The Law Commission report of 2009, which obviously had been commissioned under the previous administration, jointly with the Scottish Law Commission, recommended this set of changes. It's it's a small but significant change in the archaic nature of insurance law, which has hitherto been in an unwritten form, and this piece of legislation, as far as I can see, updates those provisions and makes sure that there is a new burden to be placed on the party giving insurance cover, the insurer, to ask more specific questions from the consumer when requiring a disclosure of relevant information, rather than the caveat that used to be there, that the onus was on the insured party to disclose everything that might be relevant, and potentially if they accidentally forgot to disclose something, even a small item, then risk their insurance cover being invalid. So it's a generally welcome step forward, but I'd be grateful if the Minister could confirm that I'm correct in my view.
Minister. Well, Mr. Amess, I don't think it's very much I wish to add to what the Honourable Member said, save for the fact that the bill is supported by Age UK, British Heart Foundation, Consumer Focus, Macmillan Cancer Support, the Amess Society, Trading Centre Institute, University of Manchester, Which and Unlock. And it demonstrates, I think, the wide support this bill commands. There has been quite a lengthy process of consultation with the industry and consumer groups. The bill stems from the excellent work that the Law Commission has undertaken. I'd like to take this opportunity to place on record my thanks to the work that they have done in securing and putting forward these measures. It is an important way of strengthening consumer protection. It reflects best practice in the industry, and the definitions the Honourable Member referred to that are in Clause 1 of the bill are drafted with the support of the industry and the FSA, and also reflect best practice.
The question is that Clause 1 stand part of the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. We now come to Amendment 1 to Clause 2, with which we shall have the debate on Clause stand part. I call Mr. Christopher Lizzie.
Well, thank you, Mr. Amess. My amendment, and honourable gentlemen and honourable ladies would maybe glad to know this is the only amendment that has been selected to this bill. I did table others, but unfortunately, Mr. Chairman, you chose in your wisdom not to select them today. So, amendment number 1 seeks to insert a provision on page 2 of the bill at line 14, and this is in relation to the disclosure and representations before contract or variation. And honourable members will see that the section makes provision about disclosure and representations by a consumer to an insurer before a consumer insurance contract is entered into or varied, and makes a number of provisions related to that. Now, my amendment seeks to ensure that the duties set out in this particular section are applied in such a way as to avoid what might be a perverse consequence of what is generally accepted to be a positive step forward, namely the requirement that there is more precision, better specification of the items that need to be disclosed by a consumer of an insurance product. So the amendment reads, that in the exercise of its functions under this section, the insurer should have regard to the principle that a burden or restriction which is imposed on a consumer through any additional requests to confirm or amend particulars should be proportionate to the benefits considered in general terms which are expected to result from the imposition of that burden or restriction. What does that mean? I foresee some circumstances, Mr. Amess, and this really is my only substantive concern with the whole bill, where some consumers, perhaps busy consumers with family, with children, with jobs, second jobs, who knows, whatever, who don't necessarily have the time and the luxury and the space to pore over the normal documentation that each of us will have to complete when entering into a contract of insurance. So if honourable members have recently taken out car insurance online, or they've renewed their house insurance, often they'll find that there's a lot of small print associated with that if they click to find the extra information and so forth. We know that there are already problems generally in society with people not reading the small print of a document. But imagine a circumstance where potentially, under this bill, a series of 10, 20, 30, 40 questions are presented to a consumer, and they are required to answer all of those questions in great detail before the insurance contract can be completed. Now, in theory, I think that is an important thing to do, completing a full disclosure, making sure everything is written out. But in practice, I know and I suspect that there will be some consumers who will say, well, I can't be bothered with that questionnaire. I can't be bothered with the paperwork involved with this. It's only contents insurance. It's only flood insurance. What are the chances of me being flooded anyway? I just can't be bothered with the hassle of completing all of that extra voluminous information that might be required. And so I have a slight anxiety, and it's only a slight anxiety, that if the pendulum swings so far from having all of the burden entirely on the consumer to voluntarily and in an unstructured way offer up information about anything they might disclose, to a situation where there has to be a series of very specified individual questions asked on disclosure, that we might find ourselves in our circumstances where consumers, perhaps by inertia or because they're busy or by neglect, for a number of reasons, might not enter into insurance cover that they would otherwise have done. What is the problem with that? Well, I suppose it would be possible to say caveat emptor, then the consumer, it's their own problem, they really should have taken more time and care. If they then fall foul in a situation they found themselves uninsured, they're not covered for floods or for accidents or whatever it might be that befalls them. But actually, I think there is a duty on us to ensure that, as far as possible, we make it convenient and relatively simple for consumers to get cover that they genuinely need, and as a society we either expect them to have, because some insurances are mandatory, or that it would be sensible and prudent for an ordinary householder to ensure that they had. I think we've heard many stories over the past of insurers, of customers, of residents who've forgotten to complete their insurance renewals, where they've gone uninsured, and then there are massive problems that fall as a result. I mean, I think in some circumstances the taxpayer can end up picking up the bill in some flood circumstances and so forth. So this is partly about protecting the taxpayer's money as well. So I want to hear from the Minister, how can we frame these arrangements in such a way to ensure that the insurance industry, yes, is more specific about the questions, but doesn't go so far as to deter customers from doing the necessary thing and getting the cover. The way I've tried to frame the amendment is that this should be done with the principle that the insurer bears in mind the burden that could fall upon the consumer, and therefore we need a proportionate approach to be taken into account. It's a difficult thing to frame in legislation, I accept. But that is really essentially the purpose of Amendment 1. I hope that the Minister will accept that it's an important point to raise, and it's really my only substantive query with the bill.
Amendment proposed, insert the words as on the order paper. The question is the amendment be made. Minister.
Thank you very much, and I'm pleased that the Honourable seems to be sort of pushing this as a probing amendment rather than to elicit some answers to these questions. And he's right, it is important that insurers don't require burdensome or excessive disclosures from consumers, especially if this might put them off purchasing insurance. However, I don't think it's necessary to make further provisions to achieve this. The bill already encourages it. 8 and simple targeted questions are the most cost-effective for the insurers. And let me set out in more detail. Now, the amendment refers to the burdens or restrictions created by requests to confirm or amend particulars, though obviously the principle would apply to any question asked by insurers. Clause 3, subsection 3 of the bill, refers specifically to requests to confirm or amend particulars, and of course this is in itself intended to reduce the burden on consumers. So what happens at the moment is the consumer is commonly asked to confirm or amend particulars previously given when they are renewing their insurance policy. Best market practice is to send the consumer a letter containing all the information which they provided when first taking out the policy. And the Ombudsman Service clearly believe this is best practice, and to quote from their regular newspaper, Ombudsman News, customers cannot be expected to remember all the details of information they provided perhaps several years earlier. So the consumer is asked to read and consider the list and to contact the insurer if the facts have changed. This makes the process as simple as possible for the consumer. Now, the bill preserves the incentives for insurers to follow this practice by allowing failures to comply with their request to be capable of being a misrepresentation. So in this instance, we need not to be concerned that insurers will make burdensome requests. However, there is a wider set of factors influencing whether they will do so. Now, it's worth reminding ourselves that this bill brings statute into line with developments of approaches in industry, the FSA and the FOS. The law is catching up with market practice, and this is not legislation which will significantly change market practice.
Just on
Yes. Mr. Christopher Less.
I'm very grateful to Minister. It's very helpful. His comments are extremely useful. I don't know whether this is me being a conspiracy theorist, but the risk register paragraphs from the explanatory notes, in other words, the regulatory impact assessment, have been perhaps inadvertently deleted from the explanatory notes on page 18. It doesn't actually say in the explanatory notes distributed whether an assessment has been made of the costs and the benefits to the insurance industry when it comes to, or the costs to the consumers when it comes to what the effect could be. I'm quite sure the government isn't here as well withholding the risk listings on this particular bill. But that would be a churlish point to make. But I'd be grateful if you could just elaborate. Seeing as he's talking about the costs and the benefits of the provisions, if you can just tell us what they are.
Minister.
And Council will remember to not quite be as conspiratorial as to think that everything is about risk registers. This is actually a regulatory impact assessment. And, of course, he will have known in his preparation for this bill that the impact assessment is available to the House. And as may not be in explanatory notes, and there's a clearly misprint there, but the impact assessment has been available to members of the committee. As I say, the point to bear in mind is, in this case, that perhaps rather unusually, statute is catching up with market practice rather than statute changing market practice. And because we're catching up with market practice, Mr. Amess, we do not expect insurers to respond to the abolition of the duty of disclosure by simply asking more questions. Consumers currently face that duty in law, but in fact not in practice. The principle that insurers should ask clear questions about matters generally found in the material was set out 25 years ago in an ABI statement of practice. However, we can be further reassured that insurers will not ask a disproportionately burdensome set of questions. In fact, there are a series of incentives for them not to do so, which are set out in the bill, as well as cost pressures too, which would discourage them for doing so. I think any view that this bill would lead insurers to ask a greater number or more burdensome set of questions misses two things. Firstly, it does not take into account the role of inducement in the type of questions which entitle an insurer to a remedy. Clause 4, subsection 1b, sets out that an insurer is not entitled to a remedy unless they can show that a consumer's misrepresentation induced them to enter into a contract at all or on its current terms. As a result, insurers are unlikely to ask questions seeking answers which they do not need to rely on. If they were to do so, it would be of no advantage, as they have no remedy under the bill if that information was not provided or was incorrectly provided. We expect questions only to be asked if the purpose is to elicit relevant information which the insurer needs to know. This ensures that the questions asked will be proportionate to the benefits insurers derived from them.
Would the Minister allow me to just...
Yeah, Mr. Christopher Less.
Sorry to interrupt the Minister. And, the point he makes about clause 4, subclause 1b is absolutely right. But has he an estimate, in plain layman's terms, of how many questions I'm going to be asked next time I want to take out household insurance, next time the whip for the government wants to take out car insurance? What sort of... Give me a... He doesn't drive, I apologise to the government whip. He's driven, of course. That is the case for government ministers. But if a typical member, the honourable lady who's here today, were to be getting car insurance, what number of questions... I just think, in layman's terms, what number of questions are we going to be asked?
Minister, it's not a question about number. It's not a question about number of questions. As I said, what will happen is the insurer will normally send a letter to the policyholder seeking to clarify, confirm questions already asked at the time initial questionnaire, initial policy was taken out. And it will depend, I suppose, Mr. Amess, on the type of policy it is and their insurer, and no more so than it does now. And I think what we're trying to do is to get to a position where insurers are asking a sensible set of questions for a sensible policy. And I don't think it's appropriate for us to set out on the face of this bill a precise number of questions. It would be absurd for us to do so, Mr. Amess. And I think that we have to rely upon the judgment of the insurers and their compliance with market practice and the ABI code to determine that. So I think it is not entirely reasonable. I think then the next point I'd make is, and it perhaps addresses in part the question that the honourable member asked, is that we should think about the effect of complex questionnaires on the reasonableness test set out in Clause 3 of the bill. Now, if an insurer does generate a long, complicated questionnaire, then this may have a bearing on whether a consumer has taken reasonable care not to make a misrepresentation. So clearly, a hugely long and voluminous 300-page questionnaire would contain so many questions that perhaps it would be fair to assume that any misrepresentation made was inadvertent. But of course, a shorter, more compact questionnaire really focuses the consumer's mind. So I think there's an incentive on behalf of the insurer just to think about this quite carefully. Again, I don't think it's in the insurer's interest to impose burdens on consumers, as to do so may undermine any right they have to refuse or alter claims. So what we're trying to do is get a sort of sensible approach to asking these questions. And in the past, and we discussed this on at second reading, insurers have sought in the past to rely upon incorrect answers given to questions which aren't material to the claim being made as a reason for disallowing that claim. We're moving away from that old practice in this bill. So it's important that the insurer gets the information they need to accept that claim. If they ask questions which are irrelevant, then actually their chance of getting a remedy are that much less. So I think there's an incentive in the bill to get to the right point. Now, I just say I don't think the bill will drive insurers to make more burdensome demands of consumers. I also think there's a strong market incentive for insurers not to overload consumers with too much paperwork. Frankly, if a questionnaire looks too difficult to respond to, then consumers will go somewhere else. If they get this 300-page questionnaire, they'll probably think, I'm not going to be bothered getting insurance from this company. I'm going to go to get insurance from Company X, which has a 10-question questionnaire. So I just think there's a market discipline that will get insurers into the right place. Again, there's an internal cost pressure. So not only are you thinking about comparing your questionnaire to that of your competitors, it takes a lot of time and money to process these questionnaires when they come back. And insurers will think about a cost-benefit analysis when developing their questionnaire and ask as few questions as possible in order to appropriately assess the risk of that policy. So I think if we were to even think about trying to prescribe or limit the questions insurers are able to ask, I think the effect would be to actually increase premiums. If insurers can't ask enough questions to gather information, they need to assess risk, they're likely to increase the premium to cover the increased level of uncertainty. So I do think there's a sense of proportion here that in part is driven through the bill, in part driven through market pressures and cost pressures. So I don't believe that it's necessary to include further provisions which would force insurers to make proportionate demands. I think this bill has the checks and balances in there. It is a bill that set out some high-level principles rather than going into excessive detail. That approach, of course, Mr. Amess, so setting out these high-level principles will mean that it will prevent the law from becoming outdated again. We are responding to a situation that was set in place in 1906. It's taken us to 2012 to change it and get the law in place with market practice. So I don't think we want to wait another 106 years to change the number of questions from 10 to 20. Let's deal with the level of high principles at this case. And finally, Mr. Amess, I would just pray in aid, as occasionally ministers do, but not universally the case, that I mentioned the lengthy list of supporters of this bill. They suggest that the bill should. They do not suggest that the bill should be amended or its implementation delayed. Clearly, there's a lot of consumer interest in making sure this gets onto the statute book as quickly as possible and unamended. And I therefore ask my honourable friends to oppose the honourable member's amendment if he chooses to test the will of this committee.
Mr. Christopher.
Well, I'm very grateful to the Minister. I appreciate the way in which he's responded to the amendment, which was genuinely intended to be constructive. I am glad that the bill has not just all-party support, but has such support from across proponents of it, from the Law Commission and from industry itself. Though it is important, Mr Amess, just to remind those outside the House that this is still going to be an act of Parliament, and it is the duty of Her Majesty's Opposition to make sure that we scrutinise these things. Just because the Venerable Law Commission may propose a change in primary legislation does not necessarily mean it is the right thing to do, and therefore it's our duty just to make sure that we're checking what goes on. Otherwise we just whisk through legislation on a rubber stamp, and that's why I have some misgivings about second readings being taken in committee, for example. But nevertheless, I did ask the Minister, I thought, a fairly straightforward question. I would have hoped that his might have had some inspiration, or some assessment might have been made about, in general, how many questions typically people will be asked, given a sort of bog standard insurance product for a car or for contents or for household. I just wanted to get a flavour for what sort of extra administrative burden that might be. He first of all said, I think, well, no more probably than they do now. I think that was paraphrasing his comment. But then he said, well, consumers might end up shopping around and there'd be a market discipline to bear down on the number of questions. I'm not sure it's necessarily... Well, maybe that is the right way to minimise the number of questions. It might be successful, it might not. But I imagine that each insurer has an objective, not least to their reinsurers or wholesale or wherever, to make sure that they are asking the right number of questions that fit the particular merits of that particular insurance cover. And we should just be a little bit careful about having the disclosure issues driven by a commercial imperative rather than by the proper and full disclosure requirements that would be necessary and would fit those particular circumstances. But his point was very helpful about Clause 3, applying in terms of vexatious or voluminous questions, maybe allowing a consumer then to be able to continue with their claim, or the insurer not to be able to nullify a claim because of the on the inadvertence point. And so he was, and it's important that because you know, case law does test the statements of ministers in court when quoted in proceedings, and so the minister's comments about the applicability of Clause 3 here are very useful insofar as excessive questions may fall foul of the provisions in Clause 3. So with the assurances that the Minister gives, for the time being at least, we might want to look at this at report stage, but I think I'll be happy to withdraw the amendment that we have before us, amendment number 1. I think the point has been made and taken into account, and I'm conscious that we don't wish to delay proceedings, but I still have a slight worry and anxiety in the back of my mind about those who might go without cover if there is this excessive amount of questions being asked.
Is it your pleasure that the amendment be withdrawn?
Aye.
Amendment by leave withdrawn. The question is that Clause 2 stand part of the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The question is that Clause 3 stand part of the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The question is that Clause 4 stand part of the bill, with which it will be convenient to consider the questions that Clause 5 stand part, and that Schedule 1 be the first schedule to the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. With the leave of the committee, I may put the questions on Clauses 6, 7 and 8 together.
Aye.
Aye. The question is that Clauses 6, 7 and 8 stand part of the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The question is that Clause 9 stand part of the bill, with which it will be convenient to consider the question that Schedule 2 be the second schedule to the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. With leave of the committee, may I put the questions on Clauses 10, 11 and 12 together?
Aye.
The question is that Clauses 10, 11 and 12 stand part of the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The question is that Schedule 1 be the first schedule to the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no, I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. The question is that Schedule 2 be the second schedule to the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye. To the contrary, no, I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. The question is that I do report the bill to the House. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no, I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. Order, order.